Kolbe is kind of like oxygen. If I don't know somebody's Kolbe, I don't really know how to interact with them. I feel like I'm doing them a disservice by coaching. The worst thing I want to do is coach somebody that would work against their grain. It's fun when you go into an organization and you inventory the team and you find out, wow, we could tap into this talent and you're not even using it. And then you reach somebody at such a deep level, like, oh, I could do that. You'd let me do, you understand that, you see the value of it, but they may have never had the language or the words to articulate it or even see it in themselves until you can put it in front of them. And then everyone looks at each other different.
Welcome to Powered by Instinct, a podcast for professionals who think about how your fundamental nature drives performance. In each episode, Kolbe experts will interview top performers, team leaders, consultants, and coaches to discuss identifying team members' strengths, aligning those strengths with their jobs, and optimizing individual and team performance. If you're interested in getting more done more naturally, then let's jump in.
Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Powered by Instinct podcast. I'm hosting today, and I'm Eric. I'm a 5392, and I'm joined by someone with the perfect MO, Marit Peters. She also has a 5392, and so we're going to talk about all of the cool work that she does in the insurance business because she is actually the president of the IAT and has been doing this stuff for 20 plus years. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun to I'm kind of worried about where we're going to land. When you have two 5392s, we don't have a clue where we're going, what we're going to say, but this should be fun. And it's been a privilege to be in the Kolbe world for over 20 years, like you said. Exciting to have this conversation. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we're doing this on the web and, we're using cameras and all that fun stuff. But fun fact, we live about 20 minutes away I'm about 20 minutes north of where you live. So at some point we'll get together in real life.
Yes. And then we'll just do it in person. We'll do like a fly-by-night kind of a little thing, right? So that'll be awesome.
There we go. We'll do a podcast on my phone, just kind of holding it out there.
There you go. Perfect.
All right. So now we'll get to the actual content. We'll talk about some Kolbe stuff. We'll talk about how you're using it with your clients in your own business and how it's affected your life. If you could just kind of give us the backstory or some of the work that you've been doing broadly with your clients.
For me, and I think folks who know me will know that, for me, Kolbe is kind of like oxygen. If I don't know somebody's Kolbe, I don't really know how to interact with them. I feel like I'm doing them a disservice by coaching. But at the end of the day, and it's funny, I was thinking about the other day, like, what did I want to be when I grew up, when I was a kid? And I was an athlete growing up, and I really thought I was going to be a coach. I really thought that was the space. And it kind of had this aha moment a couple of years ago where I was like, actually, I am a coach, just not an athletic coach. It's a business coach. It's a personal coach for folks. And I'm super lucky that I get to work with lots of businesses, large businesses, small businesses. But for me, the entry point is let's do Kolbes. Because the worst thing I want to do is coach somebody that would work against their grain. And so whether it's I'm in a boardroom with a business that's working together or a management team or an association, I do a lot of work with associations. I always lead with let's understand who's in the room, how they're going to communicate, how are they going to deal with conflict, where are they going to wear themselves out, do we have the right synergy or not? So oftentimes I'll actually do Kolbes for everyone before I come into a boardroom and we'll realize we're missing certain MOs, right? And it's like, wait a second, before we do this meeting, we're missing a voice. And I have some fun stories around that, like the most boring meetings I've ever been in and the best meetings and the most polarized. And I can always go back to Kolbe and be like, we knew that's what was going to happen. And so I'm really purposeful in making sure that when we have conversations, and I'm very team oriented. So I'm almost an anti-one-on-one human, to be honest with you. Like if you ever worked with me and people say, well, I'm doing all these one-on-ones, I'll always say, why? We're always better when we're collaborating. We've got more people and you're building trust and bridges, but we do better when we have more people in the room. But that means we need to understand what the impact, and there's going to be some conflict. There's going to be that, like redundancy that occurs where people do or don't value themselves. But I think probably the most powerful thing I feel like's happened over the years is people realize, oh, like we need different people in the room. Like we hear about diversity all the time, right? And so a lot of times that has to do with, whether we have men and women or whatever in the room or what races we have. But for me, diversity is about how we think and how we problem solve and our instinctual thing. And it's always a wonderful aha when I'm working with folks and they realize, boy, that person's really irritating, and they leave the room going, oh, I really need that person in the room, and their voice is so important. And so I feel like if I had to like drill down to anything that said, what do I do with clients and how do I work? The backstory is getting people to value different opinions and different problem solving methods and Eric, you know this, I've been around this for over 20 years. I know this stuff inside and out. I hope there's still tons to learn, but it doesn't mean it doesn't burn us out and frustrate us even individually in that case. But the awareness is amazing. And I always say, there is a difference between awareness and delusion. So it's like we have to have that conversation. But for me, when I'm working with folks, the goal is to make teams stronger. And really, whatever that looks like, it's expanding your network. In fact, our team right now is reading the book by Dan Sullivan, which of course, strategic coach folks, Who Not How, and really like getting people to really understand we need more who's in our lives, right? That have different perspectives. We'll be stronger, better, and deliver better results for our people when we have the right dynamics around us.
Yeah, it's funny. You talked about that kind of diversity, and when you're with someone that's similar, like the two of us, it's really easy to get on the same page. It's like almost instantaneous, and then we just run. When you're working with someone who's a 180 from you, oftentimes that's when the friction happens. That's when you start to butt heads. But generally, that's the who that you need to make the stuff happen. And so that's sometimes a bit of that disconnect is I really need this person to get stuff done, but they drive me a little nuts. And it sounds like that's where you kind of come in and bridge the gap and help folks figure out, here's how I work with him more effectively, or here's how I can use his amazing strengths.
So I will tell you a funny story. So first of all, we talk about fact finders, right? And initiating fact finders. There's a lot of them in our industry. They're technically very astute. And so I'll say, sometimes people will have the misnomer that like, oh, I'm a fact finder, you're a fact finder, we're going to like each other. Well, not if you disagree on facts. And then I always say, and I'll sell tickets for that all day long, right? I'll tell two quick stories about strategic planning. I had one group that was a lot of fact finding, a lot of resistant quick starts in the room. And I thought, this is going to be a little, tough, especially for my brain. And it was true that at the end of the day, it was like, oh, we're really happy with what we've got. Like a lot of questions, but no change or innovation. And so I kind of got excited when I was doing strategic planning for a group a couple of years ago. And it was like 80% quick starts. I'm thinking, I am a quick start. This is going to be the most amazing meeting in the whole world. And it was not well synergized, right? And it ended up being too many ideas. And I thought I didn't think I'd get to that place, but at the end of that meeting, I was exhausted from all the ideas. So there's something true to having the right synergy in a room, just and awareness and people understanding why they're going to feel the way they do along the way really is such a gift. And then getting them to realize, boy, we do need people to challenge us, to think differently. And when you get to that place, it's not about that moment in time. It's changing their trajectory, because from then on, they'll be thinking about, okay, wait, do we have the right voices? And sometimes when I have like the unicorn in the room who looks totally different than anyone else, I make it a real point to say, this is your job while you're here, right? You're different than the rest of the room. And so your voice is more important than ever to be able to challenge whatever it is and the thinking. And there does generally, when we walk away, a totally different level of respect for what that voice does, as opposed to being the irritant because it's the one-off that doesn't look like the rest of the team. One does not look like the others.
If I remember right, when folks call you and say, hey, Marit, I need your help, a lot of times it's an agency owner saying, hey, we're stuck, we're not growing as much as we could, or we have this problem in front of us. And that's essentially a big component of how you help them get unstuck, right?
Absolutely. And what's amazing is when we look at the reports, and to me that's the magic, right? And it's so predictable. And I think Kathy, I remember a few years ago when she said it's no longer theory, we've proven it, right? It's science, it's true. And what a wonderful moment for her, but for all of us. It's so predictable. I could have not met anyone on the team before and look at the MOs on the sales team. Like, this is the sales composition, this is the management composition. And without even knowing them, I can say, here's probably where you're stuck. If we got a lot of quick start, I can say, we probably have a lot of ideas, but we don't have enough follow through and we're probably not finishing them. And so the predictability, there's magic to it, right? People are like, well, how could you even know that? And it just lends credibility to using Kolbe in everything that we do. And we use other resources as well, but I will tell you, it's a non-negotiable for me. If I have a client come to me and say, yeah, we don't really believe in assessments, we don't do that stuff, I literally will say, then I'm not the right fit for you. I have to only work with you if we can start here and we can build from there. I get that there's cognitive and affective, and that component has a total impact. I'm not saying that doesn't have value. But if we don't understand this piece first, if the client doesn't believe in doing those pieces, I'm not going to guess with you, because I can be so much more, as all of you who are listening know this, we can be so much more effective when we have access to that information and data, and we can take the opinion out of it. That's the other thing I love, is that there isn't well, we value this or we don't value that. There's no what's better, what's not. It's what's unique and different, and what do we really need on the team. And I have some interesting stories about people that were so polarized as teams, we actually had to cancel the project. Like, there's no way we're getting through this. And it has nothing to do with whether you're good people or not, or you care or you don't. But the synergy is not we can't get it into a place that can make the team work effectively. And that has its own levels of conversation, what the next steps are.
Yeah. And, sometimes it's challenging when they bring you in, to an existing team, because if the mix isn't right, a practical solution isn't, all right, let's change the entire team, right? It's let's figure out how to make these pieces work together given what we have. But I know there was a startup where essentially from day one that you worked with, they were like, hey, let's build this around our Kolbe strengths. And they're crushing it now, right?
Yeah, I mean, so let's say, 5 years ago, they're now 5.5 years old. They started out with about 10 to 12 people. They're at over 75 employees now. I mean, it's amazing what they've done. We've been able to coach effectively. Now, I will say that the ownership is predominantly quick start. So you can feel that sense of like urgency and drive and insanity. I certainly don't help the situation, I'm sure, when I get into the mix. But we've been very purposeful about who do we need to be surrounded by? I always call it, no offense, Eric, you know this, but as quick starts, I always say we need an adult in the room or we're not going to finish what we need to. So that's my reference point, is who are the adults that we put around us, and then who's going to push us, because we need all of those voices at the end of the day, or we aren't going to be successful. And frankly, like when I go into an organization, and it's just many people who might be listening today, you're already built. And so then you say, well, what do I do now? Because you can't really go retrofit, right?
Yeah.
But you can absolutely be more strategic about where you put people in subgroups and how you get things out. But also, if you've got a predominance in the culture of a certain type of an MO, because there's been a bias of attracting those folks, getting them to just respect that we need those other talents and what they bring, although they might be frustrating, can really be a critical part of success for a business, for an agency, regardless of whether you're in insurance or anything else.
And I found, again, with people with wildly different MOs, sometimes the easiest way to get them to appreciate those differences is find some kind of quick win. Like, hey, here's how you can practically use their follow through or fact finder. Like, if you show them like, oh, this is something that can make your life easier, that really kind of narrows the gap, and they can quickly be like, okay, I get why we need that diversity.
Yeah. So one of my right hand, I say one of my right hands, I probably have 4 right hands and 2 left and right feet and whatever. I mean, I certainly need my who's in my life to be successful. Kier is a 7-8-3-2. And what she's really taught me as that follow through leading is bring her in sooner rather than later. so that she understands the big picture, and then she can really take off and execute and implement and drive closure. And the reality is that, in fact, when she's around somebody or I'm around somebody who's too much like myself, we don't value it because it's redundant talent. So when you get to really see like, boy, I can pass off, but again, I love the A to A reports that we offer. They're such a gift for people. I call it speed dating with Kolbe is how I refer to it. Let's just do this thing. But that, like what's the worst mistakes you can make with one another that I think are so important, little nuggets and so forth. But what I find is that like what they say is like come together for short spurts and then separate and go do your work. Like it doesn't mean you have to sit. If Kira and I sat next to each other all day, every day, she'd hate me, I'd hate her. It would not work. But with these little sprints where we get together, then we can come in and then divide and conquer. And we both understand the value we each bring. And that's my goal with teams across the country is help us understand how to bring the right people in at the right time, but then separate and go use your talents the most effective way. And, a lot of things we talk about in boardrooms and management meetings and team meetings is giving people the language to understand what's happening. Like you're not irritating me because I don't like you or don't value you, but your thought process is so different. And so understanding like it's okay to have the language to say, oh, I know what's happening here. Let's pause. And now I understand what you're going to do, or be able to say, for instance, let's say I'll be stereotypical. Let's say a fact finder that says, I really need having the permission to say, you know what, I need a little bit more time to process this before I can contribute to the situation. And people respect that as opposed to thinking they're not as smart or they aren't interested or they don't want to engage. Being able to really understand, hey, no, actually, for me to contribute more effectively, I need a little bit more time. Don't drop this on me. You and I, as quick starts, we can talk about anything, anytime without any prep at all. I mean, I know both of us probably got on this call and we're like, who are we talking to and what's happening today? Someone else might be like, I've got a prep and what are the questions? You and I don't even know where we're going at this point. I'm sure the group is wondering the same, who's listening, but being respectful of that process that we have, and also knowing that, I always say all the time, it's like the misnomer is that folks that are initiating fact finders and resistant to quick start aren't brainstormers. They are. You just have to give them prep time. Tell them what the topic is. You and I don't need that prep time, which we'll just ignore anyway. We'll show up because we need to. But folks who want to be part of it will then say, oh, I know that next week we're going to talk about this. Then they have the prep time to go research, prepare. And then when we get into a meeting, you allow for people to actually all share their ideas. And that's one thing that Eric has been, one of the processes that I've used for years is called silent brainstorming. And I don't know if you're familiar with that or have seen that process specifically, but it's an amazing process to use when you have a lot of people in the room, because what we tend to find is oftentimes quick starts can control the room when it comes to brainstorming because we think out loud, we speak, it's easy to do. And so what I'll tend to do is I'll say, all right, now that we're here, I want everybody to sit and write for the next 2 or 3 minutes every idea you have on whatever topic that is. Okay, so what's the most critical thing that we should be working on in 2026, for instance? Let's make it up, right? And you told people in advance you're going to do it. So there's some homework. You're bringing them in, and then you allow everybody to just sit still in that topic for a minute. And then what I do is go around the room, and we have everyone contribute one idea at a time. And what I'll say to them is, look, Eric, if Kathy has an idea that's already yours, just cross it off. We don't need to repeat it. We're just going to do one idea, and we're just going to walk around the room until we run out of ideas. We're going to put them on a whiteboard. And then at the end of it, we'll vote on what we think the most critical ones are using a weighted voting system. But what happens is everybody gets to contribute, because what happens very often is if you don't control it that way, there are a couple people that get to be the loudest. And then there's people who hide behind it. And then there's people that are like, well, I knew that, but nobody asked me. And so creating that constant process that's part of your culture of we're going to silent brainstorm. And then I say, if Eric had an idea that generates a new idea for you, just put it at the bottom of your list. And every time we get to you, we'll go until we tap out. And so that's the quantity. Then we'll vote and it's quality, but everybody gets a voice in that. And I find that when I use that process, And a lot of times, just between you and me and whoever's listening, I will start with the folks that don't have that they're the 2s and 3s and quick starts, because they don't tend to have maybe a lot of ideas, but then they're on the board, right? So they feel like I got asked and it matters, and they didn't get run over by somebody who's maybe more effervescent and, has more ideas, or, we always say the loudest isn't always right.
No, that's awesome, because I think also as you're kind of going around from person to person, you're giving those folks time to keep thinking, right? Because they're inside of their head. Well, wait, what does he mean by that? And, well, you know what? Yes, back last March, ... They're starting to connect the pieces and do some homework so that then they're ready to go. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know, you got certified, 20 plus years ago. So probably in your early teens, something like that is when you got
That's
Kolbe
right.
certified.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. That was really nice.
So what was the catalyst? What made you decide, like, yes, I need to go do this?
So I actually got hired by the Lujan insurance agency in Albuquerque. Jerry Lujan had been certified. He was part of Strategic Coach. My job was to actually come in and help them sort of look at career planning and education and that kind of stuff. So that was sort of like my intro. And the first thing he said to me is, you've got to go get certified in Kolbe so you understand this. And so I consider it a gift. I think I was probably 29 years old, but I was still in my 20s. And I got certified at that point. And I literally just took to it. Like, it just connected with me and my DNA. Now, fun fact, and you may not know this, Eric, but based on my Kolbe, not surprising that somewhere along the way, I dropped off on my CEs. And so they had to send me back through remedial training and get recertified along the way. So what I did is I worked at the Lujan agency for a couple of years, really embedded it in their culture, and it had a great support structure for it. Left the industry actually for a while. I went and worked at an aviation company in Albuquerque called Eclipse Aviation, and I ran their corporate training. And so we got the luxury of actually embedding it into lots of the departments and how they were. So imagine what it would be like to work with it was a startup. So you've got people who are like on the R&D side thinking big, and then you've got engineers who are like fact finders who are super rigid and detailed. And so they were shifting from R&D to production, which is an amazing shift, not only from a standpoint of cultural shift, and of course managed by the FAA, of course, or regulated by the FAA. So lots of rules. And so it was amazing to have a resource like this just to help bridge the gap between language. So you got salespeople, you've got designers, you've got engineers. And one thing that I've found, and I worked in a laboratory after that, a medical laboratory, you can imagine that you've got people who really think differently about products, and they really still need to have a seat at the table with one another. And what I liked about it is they're also very sciencey, nerdy, engineering people. And I always love going into a meeting where you just see everyone's irritated. Like, I can't believe I have to be here. I have to listen to her. I don't know why I'm going to do this. And, they can't help themselves. Within about 10 minutes, they're all leaning forward a little bit and they want to do more. And the person who resisted the assessment comes later and says, can I do mine now? Because it does sound legitimate. And so I love that there isn't sort of like personality is important, all of that, but especially people who are resistant, because it's so locked in science. And it's so predictable and it's so provable. And, using glop shop and things like that there's such a great technique for like anybody who's a non-believer, just is like, okay, well, I lost that battle. And it's interesting. And so you make it fun, but it's also based in science. And so you can connect with all sorts of people, because you are going to have the people who show up who resist it. And they tend to be people who are skeptical. And when you have something that is so provable and you can really get through it, what that does to build the team up, level them up, get a different caliber of conversation, and you start to understand. In fact, one of the books that I also was introduced to way back, and I kind of consider it my Bible for management, is First Break All the Rules. And one of the sentences in there is, there's nobility in every role in an organization. And so what I love about Kolbe is it really helps you see that, and how do I really uncover what people's talents are and give them the opportunity to be talented at what they do every day. And, it's fun when you go into an organization and you inventory the team and you find out, wow, we could tap into this talent and you're not even using it. And then you reach somebody at such a deep level, like, oh, I could do that. You'd let me do, you understand that, you see the value of it, but have never had the language or the words to articulate it or even see it in themselves until you can put it in front of them. And then everyone looks at each other different. I will say the gift for Kolbe for me is I can have somebody that I did not like at all. And when I see their Kolbe, I'm like, okay, we can work with this because at least I know. Doesn't mean I always like them, but that's okay. My favorite story is I was working with somebody who was a 7733 and they were leaving their job and it was very organized. And so we actually ended up hiring somebody who was a 7733. And I said, this is great. You replicate that. And all they said to me was, I hate those people. Their own MO. I hate those people. Well, because he felt like, well, I need to do my own research and I like my own procedures and I want my own structure. And so following it, it was such a good, example of you can't assume that just because you have the same MO, you will actually do it the same way, because cognitively you might have a very different approach from that. And I always love those reminders in my life. When you run across something like that, you're like, yes, that's right. Let's let them get their own way and allow them that process.
Yeah. And you see it, mode by mode. So 2 8s in Fact Finder, they're going to do they're both going to do research, but they're going to do research in different places and look for specific things.
That's right.
2 8s in Follow Through, they're going to build 2 different systems to solve the same problem.
Yeah.
They both build a system to solve it, but.
That's right. Yeah. So kind of back to that. I know I distracted myself because that's just what I squirrel moment there. But so I left the industry, went and did some other things, did some more consulting for myself, and then ended up coming back into the insurance industry and was lucky enough to be recruited here at the Independent Insurance Agents of Texas. So I moved to Austin 11 years ago, actually. So I'm just starting my 12th year in a couple of weeks, which I never thought I'd have. Eric, I never had a job more than 2 years before this. So this is like shocking all by itself. But I will say this, is I got hired at IIT because things were not working well. And when I came in, and to know my own MO when I was going through the interview process was so important, because what I said to them is, if you want things to maintain status quo, don't hire me. I'm not the right fit. If you want somebody to come in and blow things up and look totally different and challenge things and take risks, I'm your person. And I think that's really important in my own journey, to know what I'm going to do. And I will say this, we really did a massive amount of changes, and it's super exciting. And I remember when I got hired, and one of the board members was a new Kolbe, he had gone through it. I think he might have even been part of strategic coach at one point. And he said to me, well, are you going to stay? You're a 5392, like you're going to get bored and then you're going to leave. And I said, you're right. If I get bored, I will leave. And so we've just had a big vision, and I'm still here because there's still a challenge and there's still changes we've got to do. But I will also say that I spend 60 to 70% of my time actually doing consulting with agencies. And that's where I get to use my quick start. If I was just internal and I was management, I would be probably bored. And my staff is perfectly happy with me being gone, because they know if they get a week with me, they get a year's worth of ideas, and they're kind of like, you can go away now. Thanks anyway. So we find that balancing act with each other, but that self-awareness, I think, is so important, that we know where we can live and breathe it. And so I get to use my quick start every day in helping fashion new ideas and challenge organizations, but it also helps me understand who my best clients are, right? If I go work with a client who is resistant to change, I'm probably not the right coach for you. If you're somebody who really wants to change things and challenge the status quo and think about things differently and push the envelope and drive growth, I'm probably the perfect coach for you. But if you say, actually, we're really happy, we just need somebody who's going to be kind of a cheerleader behind the scenes, I've got great people. They can do it, but I'm not that person. So when I'm coming into this piece, this organization has really been a gift, because I've gotten to lead it. I was always the number 2 before this. I always got to, and I think that's great. I think number 2s are amazing, and they do a ton of work. But being able to say, I get to state what this culture is. I get to lead with the value system that we have, that we believe in. We're going to hire to that. and so forth. It can't just be lip service. It's got to be for real. In fact, I know I brought up who not how, but we just finished our whole staff. We do a book club twice a year, and we bring the whole staff in, and we bring ideas and different books that we share, and we really talk through, like, Phyllis, how do we feel philosophically? What can we do differently? How do we stretch ourselves? How do we protect each other? How do we value each other? But that doesn't happen when you just we're meeting doing productivity. We're meeting talking philosophy, and books like that can be amazing to just facilitate the conversation and challenge how we're thinking, and also have people really just take a moment and say, I totally get why this organization is different than another. And so I've gotten the privilege of working with hundreds of organizations over the last 10 years, 11 years, and be a coach and be a resource. And I mean, I think I've gotten almost 20 other people certified over the last 20 years. And I just keep dripping, like, you should get certified and you should get certified. It's like Oprah, you should get certified and you should get certified. Like, I just think that the more of us that understand it and can support it. But what I've found when I talked to a lot of my clients, the big thing they say is, we now have language to understand what's happening. We know how to hire, so we know what we're not guessing anymore. And that is an amazing process to be able to provide and continuity for teams. And I will say the funny story, I feel like I saved a brother-sister relationship once, because the CFO, she was at 8822. The CEO was her brother, who was a 9342, something like that, right? And it took until we did this for her to be like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so frustrated because I thought I'd done all the detail work, and he always has more questions, and it makes me insane. And so for her to just understand, you've done the research. Your brother he will always have a couple more questions, and we just have to know that. And it just created so much more relief and less of frustration, because now it became a game. Well, it becomes a challenge. So what other questions do you have? As opposed to, I got it done and it's baked and it's thorough. It's kind of like I say to folks when you work with a quick start, instead of coming in and saying it's done, here you go, you come into Eric and say, what I miss? Make it a game, because if you bring it to a quick start, they will change it. If you bring it to a fact finder, they're going to have details. If you bring it to a follow through, they're going to want to know what the order is and does this make sense? And if we bring it to an implementer, they're going to say, is it high quality? And did we protect everything? And so I always say, know who you're going to, because that's the lens they're going to look at. And then you think of it as, I appreciate you, because I need I need people to look at it for the facts, because I'm not looking at it for the facts. And they will have the energy to do that. And we need those people around us.
Yeah. And you brought up a couple of really good points there. I think the first was, if you're someone that's in a career transition or you don't want to be when you grow up, know yourself, and then openly share, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I need, because there's nothing worse than essentially trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. I understand, folks, they need to pay the bills and they got to take a job. You're going to be miserable if you end up in a job that's a complete opposite of you.
Yeah.
And then you've wasted that precious career time in a role that was never going to work. And then on the company side, right, you got someone who wasn't as productive as they could have been. Up front, understand yourself and share it with a potential employer. You then kind of translate that over and you'd use it with potential clients. So if you're in a client-facing role, look for the clients you're going to work best with. And then the same thing with your teammates. Here's how I roll. Here's how I do stuff. But it all starts with understanding self.
Yeah. One of the things that I feel like is one of the most beneficial processes that I use, and I know many people in the group will look at it, especially when you're looking at a new position or you're replacing a position, is having key people evaluate the job as a Kolbe C, because we can all agree on the technical job description, but how we want people to approach the job can look really wildly different. And so being able to facilitate that conversation with executives or managers on, this person says they need a 6.734, and you're saying actually we need a 5.293. I mean, they're just so wildly different, but you now have the words to say this is what. And so what we do is we have a better chance of setting up the new hire for a chance of success. Are we hiring the right person? because I have seen that fail miserably over the years, where you bring somebody in, but the management team didn't really coalesce around what the real expectations, like, and I'll use an HR director position where, there were people on the management team that really expected the detailed, organized, resistant to, like rigid piece. And then I had another group on that management team that thought, actually, we need more quick start. We need people who are thinking differently and stretching and pushing. Well, that's not the director's problem. That's the management team's problem to figure out, what do we really want on this? And so I think that lens can be terribly helpful for organizations. And a lot of the work that I do, frankly, Eric, I do ongoing work with organizations, but it's really when people are doing strategic planning and we're doing strategic changes in an organization. What are we thinking about the next generation taking over? And let's not replicate the same roles and the same processes. Let's think about succession in positions, and have we evolved what we're thinking? We want a different function in that position now that we're in a different place as an organization, and being able to provide that kind of guidance and write job descriptions that resonate with the right MO, I think is a really important part of the process. So you don't have people hiring just for the title and just for the pay and just for what that job sounds like, but they're really resonating with it because it's like, oh, I have to be that human. It sounds like me. I want to do it right now. And it gets really exciting when you can do it that way.
Yeah. And so for those that aren't familiar, we have a tool that can help you essentially build a model for a job. And a lot of the hard work is on the front end. Because as you said, sometimes you have people with different perspectives and one sees the job this way and then someone else sees the job that way. That's all right. We just need to have that conversation before we hire somebody. Otherwise, they're now going to get competing directives and they don't know what they're actually supposed to do in order to be effective at their new job.
And it's painful for everybody. Everybody's crabby.
Yeah. So, if you and I are hiring for a position together and we have different perspectives, let's sit down, talk it out, and let's figure out what the right solution is for the business. And then another kind of trap that I've seen that folks walk into is, all right, we built this job model 5 years ago. We need to fill this spot. Cool. Let's just let's dust off that old one and let's go find somebody. Roles evolve and change. And especially now with the speed of technology, you're going to have to revisit those things every, 6, 9, 18 months, somewhere in that neighborhood, because everything is going to change all of the time. And so just make sure this is still what we're looking for.
And the other layer to that is helping people understand where their biases are. Because just being able to say, well, you're wired this way, so that's maybe why you want the opposite or why you want the same, whatever that looks like. And so sometimes just pointing that out gets people going, you're right, it's actually not what I want, now that you talk about it that way. So it kind of to the conversation I was saying earlier, because Kolbe's not grounded in what's better or not, what do I value or not, it's what do I need. You now have a very unemotional conversation with folks. They know how to have it, and it's problem-solving conversations, not opinion conversations. And you get to the root cause of the issue so fast. Without it, you're absolutely totally guessing, and you're looking at people's opinions and you don't really know. But if you can just put it scientifically, these are what it is. Do you see yours? Do you see yours? Let's visit about this. We break through so much faster on what we really need as a result of that. So it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've obviously given us tons of advice, tons of things to think about as we're building high-performing teams, bringing people on. If you had one or two pieces of advice for consultants who want to go deeper, what would that advice be?
That's a good question. One of the things that I think about is sometimes I see people, especially maybe if you're newer, lead with, I do Kolbe services. And I don't think that works, honestly. I think what you've got to do is understand what you're delivering. And so for me, like I would say, in fact, I had kind of my aha moment the other day. It's like, I do strategic planning. Well, I do, but actually what I'm there is to do succession planning and perpetuation planning. So that's really what I do. And by the way, part of the process is using this resource. And so what I find is that if you just go out there and say, I do this Kolbe thing, it doesn't resonate with people. So really figuring out what are you actually doing and sell that. and speak to that, and then know that this is a non-negotiable part of your process. What I would also say is that if someone's not willing to do it, walk away from the business. I have made the mistake where people have said, well, and I'm talking about made the mistake 20 years ago because I just won't do it anymore. Literally, I will walk away from, I don't care how big the opportunity is as a coach or as a consultant. If they're not willing to do it, because sometimes you get caught in that, right? Well, I can still do a good job and maybe I'll meet them, but you want to attract clients who believe what you believe, right? And if they believe that this is going to be a fundamental part of the process, you can get there so much faster. And what I will also say is that obviously, and I'm not saying anything that any of you wouldn't know, but you got to start at the top. If you don't have the CEO's buy-in on it and you're just doing it as a sub part of the organization, it will just be a sub part of the organization. You might be lucky if it infiltrates, but it really is about buy-in and getting the executive team to really see the value, and then it'll just permeate wherever you go. I have clients who've left their organizations and then called at the next organization and said, I can't operate without this information. I need it. And so you create lifelong super fans to Kolbe, not me, but to Kolbe, to say, look, we can't operate without these resources, and really making sure that you take it deeper. And what I love is, there's a lot of us out there that do just a lot of Kolbe A's. We may not do as many B's or C's, but there's great ways to embed doing Kolbe B in the annual review process. Everybody does their own thing. Is there alignment? Using the Kolbe C's. So thinking about ways how to drip in the other tools, I think can be a really great way to say, we don't just stop right here. It's not just this one time, but how do we embed it into the DNA of an organization? And then it just becomes real easy. But like I said, for me, it's making sure that you're speaking to what you are bringing, and that's what matters. And that's not to undermine anything about Kolbe, but when you lead with Kolbe, it doesn't have the same storyline as this is what we're going to do together. And oh, by the way, here's part of our process. And then people get really stinking excited about it.
Really, what you do is succession planning or continuation planning. You could replace that with executive recruiting, coaching, team building, whatever your focus is, whatever your concentration is.
That's right.
Be amazing at that. You're just going to get supercharged results by having this understanding of people and the conative part of them.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. So like one of the big things that I am lucky enough to lead a company called Catalyst that looks at technology for insurance agencies. So we're building out a masterclass on change management. For me, like that whole model of where you need different talents in the whole change management process has been one of the most amazing things. Getting people to understand you don't have to put a whole team together. It's got to go through it, grind the whole process together. But I need quick starts here, and I need fact finders for due diligence, and then I need my follow through planners, and then I need my builders, and like people appreciating where they fit in that process. And I'll tell you, there's a group that I'm working with, and we're using a problem-solving model, DMAIC, right? Define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And what we found is we weren't closing stuff. So when I went back and looked at the project management team for that organization, we didn't have a initiating implementer. We had somebody in the middle, right? Like as a co-action, but we didn't have that rigid person that was like, it's done. I can see it. I can check it all off. And so we embedded that person into the team, and you could just see their projects finish. Like they were doing great at getting it to the 90% milestone, but they weren't getting it finalized to say, okay, all the training material is done. All the controls are in place. All of the processes have been checked. And so thinking through when you're working with clients, do they seem to be struggling, and then figuring out how to plug the right talent into the mix, regardless of where they sit in the organization, can really create amazing magic for projects.
I want to say thank you for sharing all of that amazing wisdom with us. You gave us, not surprisingly, you gave me like 4,700 ideas that are kind of bouncing around in my head right now.
Good.
For folks out there that want to connect, want to pick your brain, or maybe use some of your services, where can they find you?
You could obviously just email me at mpeters. You guys can put that out, mpeters@iit.org. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. Facebook, you might find some stuff you probably don't want to find. I don't know. But LinkedIn's a great way to reach out. And of course, I'm on the Kolbe certified consultant list as well on the Kolbe webpage, and happy to help pick anybody's brains. I get a kick out of this all the time. It's my life. So it's awesome.
All right. So I want to say thank you again for sharing all of that amazing wisdom with us. For those of you that want to learn more about Kolbe, Kolbe.com is a great place to start. You can find a local consultant. You can take your Kolbe index if you haven't yet, or you can just reach out to us and we'd love to help however we can. Till next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Powered by Instinct. This show is brought to you by the Kolbe Corp, a company that helps leaders and organizations thrive using the only instinctive strengths assessment on the market. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Powered by Instinct wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or join us online at kolbe.com/podcast for all the latest episodes.